And welcome, Paul. Glad to be on this session with you. I think collectively we have a great deal of experience we can share, hopefully, with the audience. You've done this report on DSPM, the radar reports, and talked to dozens of vendors in that process. So I'm sure you can represent that site quite well. We also, of course, have talked to dozens of customers, and I've got a little bit of the perspective to share on that. So with that as a backdrop, let's just jump right in. Anything else we need to say about our backgrounds? We represent the two respective organizations here and shared collective experience. So thank you again for being part of this. So there's been a lot of change in this space. Obviously, this report I think came out in May of this year, and even in that short amount of time since then, 6 months. There's been many acquisitions. The data landscape continues to be very threatening. We read about breaches on a regular basis. I think the only thing I would say that's importantly changed in my mind is that there's been an increased awareness on the part of the community about DSPM as a solution to data security in particular. So given that as a backdrop, Paul, what this slide, I know it was part of the report, but I wanted to get your perspective, kind of what's driving this activity, the change, the mergers, the increased awareness, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, thanks, Dave, and I suppose maybe I should say hello as well. So thanks for having me here. It's a topic I always enjoy talking about. And you mentioned kind of our collective experience. Maybe if I just give a very brief overview of my background, just for a little bit of context of why we do these reports and how we put them together. So I'm, as you said before, I'm the author of this report on data security posture management. But I'm also a CTO of a UK-based consultancy firm as well. So, it's funny you was talking about, spoke to dozens of vendors for writing this report, and you guys speak to dozens of customers. Well, I get the luxury of doing both as well. So in my kind of my non-GigaOm role, I talk to customers of all sorts, from very small to very large, around a whole bunch of data security, compliance, governance, and management topics. And I think one of the things that I'm seeing increasingly is, data is absolutely core to the day-to-day running of any modern business. If you're an organization, you are making business decisions on a daily basis based on the information you hold. That we call it data, but actually the useful thing is the information that data produces. And it's, as I say, it's absolutely essential to the modern business. It's a core business asset, and I think businesses need to treat it as such. I think we've potentially in the past been a little I don't know, maybe taking our data security and our data reliability and data resilience maybe a little bit for granted. We've not often seen the risk, and that led to, if you wind back the clock 7 or 8 years, that led to a massive change that ultimately led actually for, you've probably been able to tell I'm in the UK. I'm not from the US. For those who thought their headphones were going a bit strange, no, it is an English accent. But here in the UK and the broader EU, we saw this. We saw the General Data Protection Act, GDPR, and that changed the way that lots of organisations had to look at their data. And part of the genesis of that was that because actually, before that, too many companies were very lax and laissez-faire about the way that they manage that data, which led to our information, information about me and you and the people watching this webinar, led to the fact that our data was not treated with the respect that personal information about us should be treated. And that's become that's driven a whole cultural change, I think, in the way that the data has been looked at, in a way that organizations need to take that kind of how seriously organizations need to take that data. There's been a couple of other things that have driven this kind of interest around data security posture management. So, there's been that kind of general change, but there's also been a move to cloud, as we've we no longer have all of our data in a data center that we can see and we can feed and water and look at. Today our data repositories are much more spread much more geographically and much more diverse. They are in data centers, yes, but they're in cloud applications, they're in SaaS applications. And, Dave, as you know, that's just the ones that we know about. Right. There's a whole bunch of data repositories where our data is that maybe we don't even know is there right now, and that's that causes all kinds of problems for organizations. And I think we're also seeing, I talked about GDPR before, we're also seeing this kind of greater regulatory landscape that the organizations have to deal with. But we're also seeing, and I'm sure people on this call will see that as well. We're also seeing an increasing demand from our customers to ask us about, hey, how are you securing my information? I'm securing my information. What are you doing about it? When I give you my information, where are you holding it? What are the controls you've got in place to make sure that that data doesn't get lost, doesn't get destroyed, doesn't get misused? And all of these things lead to data being a kind of a primary goal for the cyber criminal. The cyber criminal is after our information, because that's the thing that they can monetize. That's the major disruption they can cause to a business. That's the reputational damage they can cause to a business. So all of these things together has put a demand on organizations to make sure they have appropriate data security and data security policies, processes. And the reality is data security technologies to help to help enforce those kind of those same policies and processes. We can have lots and lots of policies and processes around how we use data, but the reality for an enterprise of any kind of size is the problem's too large, too complex, too fast moving to rely on policy and process. So we need technology behind that. And I've managed to do all that, Dave, without even mentioning AI. But we can, I get a feeling we might come back to that a bit later.
Yeah, well, we'll come back to that, but you certainly have highlighted, the intersection of privacy and governance, risk compliance, all those factors, and data is sort of that common element, that's foundational for all those. So having good controls and good visibility into it makes sense. We have a slide that I like to share that talks about what's the cost of all this, right? And this kind of summarizes it, but you can see the average cost for a breach is rising. That was a 2023 spec, and I'm sure it's even higher yet this year in 2024. I found it interesting that 70% of organizations have 6 or more compliance frameworks they have to adhere to, and the regulatory penalties for non-compliance are increasing and being, more strictly enforced over time. The global data creation driven by, data democratization and all the, mining and intelligent BI activity, even development activity, as the right-hand side sort of implies, is really just causing an explosion in data creation. We have at least 2, maybe more customers today with exabyte level stores, right? And so I'm looking on that graph at the bottom there, and it says 2025. 2020, 47, 175. I bet you we're eclipsing that because, alone, I know of two accounts with that are just, our recent customers, exabyte level. And if you go on up to the next level, thousands of exabytes, you're into, or zettabytes, then you're into, numbers that we just haven't seen in ever. So having that scale and achieving scale, I think, is a really key component of this as well. And we'll maybe talk a bit more about that. Let's jump into the report. Paul, maybe just start with, what are the axes? What does it mean? How did you design this kind of an evaluation of solutions?
Yeah, and let me start actually with what our radar report is and what it isn't,
Sure.
and then we'll kind of talk on that because obviously we're all used to, and we all use them. I use, maybe I shouldn't even mention this. I look at analyst reports that aren't GigaOm reports, because we all look at analyst reports. We all know who the analyst firms are,
Sure.
and analyst firms all do things. Look at slightly different things. So, so some might be looking at strategic direction, some might be looking at market capitalization, some might be looking at market share, and looking at this strategically. What we do at GigaOm is that we're not looking to compete in that space. That's not what we try and do. There's lots of, there's analyst firms out there who do a great job at doing that. We're not trying to be that. But what we are, and I mentioned this kind of in my introduction for a little bit of context, is that most of my colleagues who work as GigaOm analysts, we also have real jobs, that aren't just analysts sitting in ivory towers casting wisdom upon small people. We have real jobs where we're dealing with customers, we're deploying technology, we're working in real environments. So we are very much a practitioner, technology-led analyst firm. So what we look for when we write a radar report, so our radar reports are if you imagine, I'm sure, I know, Dave, you've been through loads of these, and I'm sure lots of people in the audience would have done this as well. But when you're looking to buy some technology, what's the approach that many of us will do? We'll do some research. That's probably includes some kind of request for proposal, an RFP, a tender. We'll put a tender out to market, and then and within that tender, what we'll do is we'll write a little bit of a scope of the thing that we're trying to do, and then we'll write some criteria that's important to us as an organization to say, here's the problem. This is what we'd like to do about it. We're looking for some solutions that do X, Y, and Z. And that's kind of what we do. So at GigaOm, we actually write a report that goes alongside this, which is called our key criteria report. Think about that as we write an RFP. We write a request for proposal. The radar report that you're looking at is, when you get all those responses back, so you push that out as a company, you then get the 50 vendors who come back to you, or the 50 resellers telling you this is the solution you want. You'll put together some kind of scoring matrix that will look at that and say, right, let me score. How does that vendor look against that requirement that I had? And you'll put that together and come up with a matrix that says, great, let's now go and not necessarily pick that one, but let's go and look in more detail at these 5 over here. And that's exactly what we look to do with our radar report. So we write a key criteria that these are the things that we're looking for. And what the radar report is a summation of the way we have scored those vendors against the criteria that we're looking at. So none of the vendors on the report, we're not making I don't write these reports looking at this, and none of my colleagues do, looking at this saying we are the final word on all of these vendors and what you should expect from them. What we're doing is we set a set of criteria, and then this is how those vendors perform against that specific criteria. And then we lay them out. So the radar, we all love a graphical image from an analyst firm. So, ours is a radar graphic. So ignore the idea that many of us have got used to, that it's a certain part of a radar, which means better, a certain part of a graphic, which means better or worse. That's not kind of what we're doing here. So in each of those kind of 4 quadrants, what we're saying is that vendors that meet a certain set of criteria will sit in those quadrants. And then those vendors who are closer to the middle deliver on the metrics that we looked at better than the other vendors. So closer to the middle is the better ones in those quadrants, but each of those quadrants means something slightly different.
That's what your leaders bubble in the darker gray area, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did just want to point out that on the report, when you guys see it, you might be surprised or otherwise to realize that I did not put Sentra in massive capitalization, really, really big text, and make them blue specifically. I think that was a Dave.
That was definitely our marketing department, I think. Yeah.
So we put this together, and it kind of it puts us in certain directions. So as you mentioned, Dave, we've kind of got these axes here, maturity and innovation. So what does that mean? Well, for maturity, what we're really looking at is during the life cycle of a contract. So when you go out and buy this solution, because these radar reports are aimed at IT buyers, they're not aimed at the industry, they're not aimed at vendors, they're aimed at people who are buying IT, and it's to give them a bit of a view of what a particular part of the market looks like, DSPM in this case. So so our maturity vendors are the ones who are focused on, they've maybe already got a solution in place, or they have an established solution, and what they're doing is any kind of improvement during that is likely to live within the way that they currently deliver their solution. So you will probably end up with a solution that is still relatively familiar looking at the other end of it. Our innovation vendors are doing things slightly differently. So what they might look at is, they might be looking to fill gaps in a portfolio. So they will be bringing lots of new features relatively quickly. They might be looking at acquisition as a way of doing that. So they might acquire another vendor to fill a gap, or they're maybe focusing on some small things. And what you'll see from this is that the majority of vendors we looked at sit in that innovation space. And the reason that's the case here is because DSPM in itself, while using some existing disciplines, is in itself a relatively new discipline. So I think there's still a little bit of kind of maneuvering for position to say, well, what actually even is DSPM? So we talk about data security posture management. Well, is DSPM a thing in itself? Is it a subset of a bigger data security posture, data security platform conversation? You know, is it part of a bigger conversation? Is it just part of a thing? Is it a thing in itself? So there's this. So this is why you see quite a lot of innovation focused vendors in this space.
Mhm.
Feature and platform is relatively straightforward. Our platform vendors are the ones that are tackling the broadest set of challenges. So of the things that we looked at, they're tackling the broadest set. They are probably tackling that for the broadest set of customer types. So they're not just focused on massive enterprise or small business, or they're maybe not just focused on public sector. They are focused across the board pretty much. And our feature vendors tend to have a more singular focus, so they might be looking at a specific type of the industry. So they only supply their solution to federal organizations.
Or could it be use case focused?
Yeah, and some of it can be use case focused as well. So they may be looking at, they are only securing specific data types or specific data types inside of if you were to look at some of the reports I do where maybe we include Microsoft in them. Microsoft's focus is doing things for Microsoft 365. If you're not a Microsoft 365 house, then maybe that solution is not going to be a great fit for you because you do something else. So, they're always quite a good example of this kind of more feature specific, so absolutely right. Yeah, that they are looking at things that are, maybe either a very specific product focus or often a very specific market focus. So that's kind of the difference between them. So I know I
I
covered a
know.
lot there. It was a
No,
short question, big answer.
that's great. Like Normalize, I know was just recently acquired by Proofpoint. There's been other acquisitions. What does that change the position for that company, or does it? What's been the impact of those acquisitions that you've seen so far?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question about acquisition, and and I know we've spoken before about this, Dave, but I think this is we just touched on this idea that is data security posture management a subject in itself, or is it a subset of a bigger problem? And I think one of the things that we're seeing is that lots of organizations I speak to, and you guys are probably seeing something similar, when they're looking at data security, actually what they don't want, what do you know what we had traditionally that, I said before, data security posture management in itself is a relatively new discipline, but it's
Mhm.
made up of a bunch of things that aren't new disciplines. So, it's got things like data discovery and classification. It's got things like DLP in there. It might have things like encryption. It might have, data discovery in there. There's a whole bunch of things that organizations have bought point solutions to do in the past. So maybe you've got a DLP solution, maybe you've got some other kind of you've got a data discovery solution, you might have a solution that does classification. But actually, what you don't want as an organization in modern IT is any more security tools. You talked before about the average cost of a breach. Well, I think
Mhm.
the number of security tools that an organization have it averages something like 60, I think, from some recent research. Nobody wants to be managing 60 different security tools. Why
Right.
would you want to do, why would you want to put yourself through that? So we are seeing this kind of push to consolidation. I think what some of the vendors, you mentioned kind of Normalize's recent acquisition, and there's a whole bunch in the cybersecurity and data security space that have happened
Mhm.
over this year, 2024. That I think what we're starting to see is that the bigger organizations have recognized that they see gaps in their portfolio, and what they're looking at is, how do I address that gap? And your two ways is, I build it myself, or do I
Mhm.
find somebody who's a good fit in terms of the way that they deliver their technology, will fit in our broader portfolio? Let me go and acquire that. And that goes back to that conversation we had about maturity and innovation before, that one of the ways of being an innovation focused vendor is, I've got some gaps, let me go and buy some people, because that
Sure.
leads to a lot of change potentially for customers of that
So,
technology.
so do you see a trend then in the direction, increasing trend towards platform plays? Meaning, and when I say that, we define a platform as DSPM plus data detection response,
Yeah.
DDR, DAG. Are you seeing that as well amongst all the vendor set that they're expanding those use cases, expanding the capabilities, so they become themselves, even if they're not acquired, they themselves become a more holistic platform. Is that the
I,
direction, for the
yeah,
industry?
yeah, I think absolutely is. And
Okay.
one of the downsides of having lots of tools, there's lots of downsides of having lots of tools, but one of the major downsides from a data security point of view is the gaps that potentially having lots of tools leaves. So we have a tool that does this, and we have one that does this, and we have one that does something else.
Yeah.
But actually, the cybersecurity risk lives in the gaps between those tools. So actually bringing those tools together into a single platform that gives you single insight, single knowledge, single set of automations and policies that help to deal with problems, they're the kind that starts to close those gaps, and yes, it does. One of the things we look at in these reports, we look at lots of technical differences because we're writing technical reports, but we do look at some non-functional things as well. So we do look at what's the impact on the business, what's the impact on cost, because cost isn't just how much a thing costs. It's not the license fee that is the only cost, it's how much to install it, but more importantly, how much to keep this thing going. So lots and lots of tools can be more expensive than one single tool that's a single management platform, single management plane, single set of policies. All of those things make a difference. And I think one of the other big changes that we're seeing, and it's an interesting dilemma for security posture management, full stop. This is data security posture management, but you can put pretty much any letter you like in front of SPM and there'll be a category for it at the moment.
Hmm. Hmm.
And organizations don't just want to know there is an issue. That's great to know, because actually one of the things we've had traditionally is we didn't know. So, if you take something like DLP's been great at stopping data leaking from an organization, but you needed to know what the data was. And so while it could capture that, great, but actually what you didn't know, that the risk existed in the first place. You might have had some fuzzy idea there's a data loss risk here, or a data
Sure.
leakage risk. So
Right.
let me build some rules that stop this type of data leaving the organization. But
Right.
wouldn't it be great to know that that's a problem? But in itself, just knowing it's a problem for most organizations isn't enough. What those organizations need is not only tell me don't just detect there's a problem there, but can you then go and do something about it, or at least tell me
Right.
what I should be doing about it? So
Right.
that's kind of, I think, why you're starting to see lots of this kind of stuff come together, and a much more holistic approach to how we deal with data security. It's not just about tell me, it's about tell me, and then would you mind doing something about it? Because that would be really helpful if you did.
Absolutely. And the way I position DLP is at the end of the day, it's a boundary control, right? And data, security posture management, or any security posture management, is agnostic to those boundaries, right? It basically identifies and can help ensure the proper security of data no matter where it lives throughout the organization. Some of your key criteria, I think we rated highly on. That's some of those specs on the left. But let me go to the next slide here, because I think you've got several of these things identified. And maybe Paul, you can just comment on them generally, and were there any one set or couple that help distinguish leaders from the others, that the rest of the pack? I'm kind of curious, like, which of these did you emphasize, or which, is there any one of them that's more important than the other, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think, whenever I've looked at data security, and I've worked on, in the data security space for quite a long time, and one of the things I always talk to my customers about is this idea of the 5 Ws. Who's accessing your data, where are they, when are they accessing it, what's in the data, and why are they using it in the first place? So I'm always looking for tools that will give me useful insight and do something about those kind of 5 Ws. And if you look at these kind of key DSPM features, most of them they'll play a part in that. But in terms of a couple of things that differentiated in this report, and I think they're useful things to know. And I'm actually going to pick potentially the least uncool sounding one of all of these,
Yeah.
and that's on-prem repositories. So, I think it's very easy in any kind of modern cybersecurity space. You absolutely see this from, some of the newer vendors in the space. There's a real focus on data security from a cloud perspective. And that's not unnecessary. It's not with it's not a poor reason to do that. That's with very good reason, because
Sure.
actually cloud is very difficult to keep your tabs on. We touched before about cloud repositories you know about. Hey, the problem with cloud repositories you don't know about is equally huge. The chance that we have data that suddenly becomes disassociated, that becomes orphaned, and then becomes stagnant, but remains in the public sphere. All of those are huge problems. But actually, for enterprises doing this at any kind of scale, the reality is they're going to have some on-prem repositories. That might be file shares, databases, whatever it might be, applications on-prem. So
Mhm.
actually having good solid support for being able to scan the data. The problem is slightly different on-prem, but the ability to be able to do that and look at your cloud data, I think is hugely important, because if I'm an enterprise, I want a holistic view of my data security posture across all of my core key data. I don't want to just know the cloud stuff. I don't just want to know the on-prem stuff. I need to know where the risks lie across the whole piece, so I can secure the whole piece. So I think that was a real key differentiator for me, because some vendors just don't do that very well, or don't really do it at all, which I think is a thing to just be aware of if you're evaluating this space. I think data access intelligence as well. So, I talked about those kind of 5 Ws. Who is accessing your data? Where are they accessing it from? And when are they accessing the data? That's hugely important to know. Why is it that that user, and what is it they're doing with that data? I think that's a really important thing to know. And again, a good differentiator. And of course, understanding what that data is doing. So why is it being used? So you mentioned there, stay on top of data movement. Where's that data going? Why is it going there? Where did it come from? Because all of these things together, I think one of the hugely important things about data security in general is context. So, we've
sure.
traditionally we've had a view of data security that says, hey, if file contains credit card, contains credit card number, then that's really sensitive, and we need to make sure we do stuff with that. But the question is really, is it? Actually, is it really sensitive? And actually, spotting a credit card in a file is really hard to do. So, and to do that accurately is really difficult to do. So, do we want to spend a lot of time doing that? Or do we actually want to spend a little bit more time understanding who is using the data and what they're doing with it at any given time, rather than actually the contents of that data? So maybe we want to look at something that says, hey, Paul has picked up this file. Paul doesn't normally touch files that look like that. And now Paul's moving it from here to here. That's a little bit strange. That's not Paul's normal activity. Maybe I want to detect that as a problem and respond to that as a problem, as opposed to Paul's stealing a whole bunch of data that includes credit card information. Well, yeah, but maybe that's because I work in finance, and actually downloading a load of credit card information is absolutely fine. So
Right.
I think it's things like that. It's that ability to have, and that comes from a good understanding of who's accessing the data and what they're doing with it, and
Sure.
actually a good broad understanding. That was because even some of the things that I mentioned, one of the things that's big for me when I look at this is, what broad coverage can you offer? Because I've got lots and lots of data repositories. I need you to be able to protect all of the data repositories that I have, because that's the only way I get a holistic picture of what my data looks like and the risk associated with it, and how I best secure that. And ultimately, that's what I want a data security posture management solution to do for me. Tell me what I've got, tell me where the risks are, help me fix the problem. That's kind of what I'm looking for.
Yeah. And what you've just said, in my mind, I summarize as you need both proactive and reactive controls, right? Or
Yeah.
capabilities, right? Any one doesn't do the full job. You need both. You mentioned earlier any acronym in front of SPM. Let's talk about AI, because you just made me think of it. Context, especially for unstructured data formats, right, is key to discerning what that actual purpose and intent of
Yeah.
that piece of data is. We deploy a lot of AI engines for doing that in unstructured documents, but more broadly, what's the impact of AI in all of this, and features that any DSPM vendor needs to have?
I think it's AI presents a whole opportunities and challenges. You just mentioned there that as Sentra, you guys are using AI to be to improve the accuracy of your platform, the speed at which you can operate, the scale at which you can operate. Because hey, AI is great for that kind of thing, taking lots and lots of data and learning things from that data. So that's great. You want to be using kind of AI at the back end, and AI, when it comes to data security, kind of sits in two camps, doesn't it? It sits in the, how do I use that kind of technology to improve my product, improve its accuracy, and improve its efficacy? Because actually, that's really important to a data security. We've all had projects, I'm sure, where we've, pick on good old DLP again. We've all tried to deploy DLP projects, and a project fails, and the reason it fails is because the DLP technology is so inaccurate in identifying potential data loss risk. So its worst case is, what gets it taken out is it's full of false positives. So lots of things it thinks is sensitive data actually isn't, and it's blocking it, and people can't do their jobs. What actually happens the other side of that, though, is it's also false negatives. It's allowing, but you don't know that. You don't know
Right.
the bit that allows a file to go out because it's not stopped it.
Sure.
So to that at that end, so AI is great for that. But the other side of it is that, one of the things you talked before about, we opened up with what are the drivers behind DSPM adoption, why are we doing reports like this over at GigaOm. It's one of those massive drivers. If I look at the last big driver I remember in the data security industry that saw a real uptick in people looking at data security tools was GDPR. And suddenly lots of businesses started running around going, I need some technology that will help me solve this. So when somebody makes a subject access request, I can find the data, or if we have a data breach, I can know what's been lost and I can tell the regulator this is what we did about it. And hopefully I can minimize that massive fine that might come my way.
Hmm.
The new GDPR, if you like, is the use of generative AI, particularly generative AI, because that's what most people are seeing. It's ChatGPT, it's Microsoft Copilot, it's Google Gemini, whatever it might be. Um, the issue with using AI inside of an organization, though, is if we're going to use it properly, our data must be prepared for the fact we're going to be using AI. So we need to know what data we have, who's got access to it, what are we allowing AI to do? Because actually, if we feed it the wrong information, the potential ramification of feeding it the wrong information is potentially huge in terms of
Right.
either we start leaking information that we shouldn't, we have people putting information into open source learning engines. We've all heard those stories that they shouldn't. We
Right.
have, AI driven agents giving answers to questions that are incorrect because we fed it the wrong information, or we've
Right.
got somebody internally saying, "Hey, tell me all the executive salaries." You think you've secured your executive salary information? Somebody's downloaded it, put it in an Excel spreadsheet, put it in SharePoint. You've asked Microsoft Copilot. Microsoft Copilot said, "Hey, you've got access to this folder over here, and look, here's all the exec salaries." All of those things can potentially
Yep.
happen.
Yep.
A worrying smile there, Dave, in that somebody who's done that. But it's that kind of thing, and so that's where I think AI is having a huge impact. One is organizations starting to understand that we need to prepare for this. We need to have some tools in place that means that our use of AI, because there's no point trying to put the genie back in the bottle. We're going to be using AI inside of organizations. We need to be able to use AI. We need to enable it with access to safe and secure data. So we need to be able to do that. At the other end of it, we're going to be using AI to help us search through our data sets, trying to find answers to problems. We're using it to improve, guys like you are using it for better accuracy around, better efficacy, better accuracy around what your tool does. So, that's kind of the two prong effect of AI as I see it currently.
I think that's a good, nice summary. Let's go to my final slide here and get your reaction on this. We see ourselves sitting amongst and within many different work streams and tool sets that exist in the organization today. I believe that integration was one of your key criteria that was on your evaluation side of things. Just for the audience, so we see ourselves providing additional contextual and granular detail, highly accurate classification of data that can supplement the existing controls. So that could be your CNAPs, right, for identifying how to prioritize which misconfigurations to go chase, or enhancing your DLP product. We integrate with Microsoft Purview and DLP to help do those sorts of things. Catalog systems, right, Elation, Calibra, keeping a accurate picture of data inventory in the organization. So but we do get asked, why don't these other tools do the job? Or are they going to be adding this functionality and therefore I don't need some central piece? So give me your comments on that.
Yeah, I think this is really important, and you're absolutely right. Integration is one of the things that I always look at in any of the reports I do. I do quite a lot of reports across the cybersecurity space, but it absolutely one of the things, because most organizations who are buying technology, the days of buying technology just for the sake of buying technology have long gone. We can't just buy technology for technology's sake.
Mhm.
What we need is that when we make an investment, is that investment going to improve the quality of the other investments that we've made? And it can't do that if no security tool particularly can live in its own kind of silo without any kind of integration anywhere else in your organization. And if we look at what something like Sentra does, well, what do we need it to be able to do? Well, one, we need it to plug into all of our data sources so we can get this holistic view. So great, that's a huge integration importance. On-prem cloud, you need to integrate with stuff so we can get the important metadata that we need so that we can start to make decisions around the way the data is being used. But it's not just about that. We need our solution to be part of our day-to-day workflow. This can't be some massive operations overhead that sits outside of everything else that we do. So, we need it. Access governance, bottom left-hand corner. We need to integrate with our identity platform so that we can understand who users are and what users are doing, and potentially feed information back and forth in and out of those systems to say, hey, I've spotted this thing about this user, or me as an identity platform, I know something about this user. You might want to increase their risk profile in the way they're accessing data. So all that kind of stuff's really useful. And then things like how I integrate with the day-to-day security workflows. So I want a tool that if it spots a problem, can either can deal with that problem, but maybe also can raise a ticket for me. So maybe it can talk to a Jira or a ServiceNow, raise a ticket. Maybe it can communicate with something like Slack, so it informs the SecOps team across Slack to say, hey, I've seen this as a problem. You might want to deal with that. As well as actually being able to look at things like Slack and say, hey, somebody's leaking data over here. You might want to deal with that. So and also being able to use that information two ways. So one is to be able to bring that information in, so to enrich your own capability. So, can Sentra use that information from an identity platform, for example, to enrich its own data access governance? Great, so that's the kind of thing you want to be able to do. But can it also enrich those other tools to say, hey, here's some data that I've got you might find useful. A great example, it's quite a popular example, this actually is the idea of using Microsoft sensitivity labels. Lots of people use Microsoft sensitivity labels. It's a really useful kind of data leak prevention and compliance tool, if you like. One of the things that can always be improved with it is the accuracy of applying the right sensitivity label to things. Tools like Sentra do that kind of classification accuracy really, really well. Can take a Microsoft label that your company spent months and months, probably years, to be honest, probably years trying to nail down and say, that's how we use labels and that's why we should be using them. A tool like Sentra can go, great, and I'm really accurate at spotting where that label should be applied. Looking for mislabeling, things like that can always be really useful. So, but it's absolutely core, Dave. You're right. It's something we call out in the reports, and we call it out because enterprise IT cybersecurity, enterprise cybersecurity is not a game for lots of individual products that are siloed apart. They've got to talk to each other, because otherwise, as a business buying this kind of stuff, you just get no value. You're just spending more money and creating more work, and actually not adding value to any of your existing investments by doing that.
And you lose the opportunity to automate
of course,
automate and streamline, which you're going to have to do with the cloud explosion that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
So. Well, Paul, we're kind of up on our time. This has been extremely valuable. I'm looking for, we'll get feedback out to the organizations that, attended this session. They'll get a free copy of the report. Of course, you can reach out to Sentra if you have any further questions, and we wish everyone to have a wonderful afternoon.